Hello, welcome to Waypoint Survival. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a 1930s hobo heater. Stay tuned. There's been a lot of modern misunderstanding about what hobos were and what they are. The classic true hobo was a traveling, working man looking to earn his living, to earn his keep, to earn a place to stay. Often during the Great Depression, they were traveling because there just was no work locally. Often, unfortunately, they were lumped in with tramps and bums. Tramps just rode the rails and walked around from town to town just looking for handouts. A hobo would often rather starve than accept charity. They had a good sense of personal pride and they wanted to work for their living. A bum, of course, is someone who just wanders around. They don't even necessarily travel from town to town, and they're just looking for alcohol. So as I said, unfortunately, many of these people got lumped in together. But history tells us that there was a lot of friction between the hobos and the tramps. As a matter of fact, they would absolutely avoid camping with each other if at all possible. So that's why we've been focusing on them. They were amazing outdoorsmen. They were also really good at stealth camping. And what we're going to show you today is a great stealth camping hack that they used. And I want to give a big shout out to my friend Craig, who spent 50 years of his life as a hobo for this great idea. Because so many people have a mistaken impression about what a real hobo was and is, they don't realize that the hobo camps, or properly known, the hobo jungles, often had someone living there semi-permanently, depending on what was going on, usually an older hobo that could no longer travel or work, and his job was to take care of camp and watch over things. Because of that, as well as the fact that there was a high degree of respect among the men for one another as working men, or working stiffs as they were sometimes referred to, and that's when they carried their bindle. They were also referred to as a bindle stiff, you know, the stick over the shoulder with the either a handkerchief or a pillowcase or something with their goods tied in it. But these men had a high respect for each other, and when they would be able to get a hold of items, maybe things that they couldn't leave with, they couldn't take it with them because they were trying to travel relatively light, so they would gather needed things. Maybe it was something like just an old ash bucket of some sort, and they would leave it at camp. Many uses: hauling water, turn it upside down, you've got a seat. There was just a ton of things that you could use this for. And so along with this and some old cans, perhaps there would be an axe or a shovel, anything that they could get a hold of. And remember, just like today, farmers and people that have farm implements and tools, they maybe give you something with a broken handle or something that they don't use anymore, something that's wore out as part of your pay, or just to be kind to you as you hit the road. So they would also find these things in city dumps. You could find cups and coffee pots and things like that, things with broken handles or a spout that had melted off, and they would use those things, and they would then leave them at the hobo jungle for the next man or the next group of men that came through. So this is why this is a very important thing. This is also really good if you're trying to be unnoticed. Remember, when you start a fire, people can see it. So this will help you to stay warm in cold weather without being really that visible to a lot of people. So the first thing you need to do after you find your bucket, you need to get some sand or some dirt. Either one will work well. Doesn't have to be dry sand or dirt. That would work better, but this is a little damp. You can see there's a little bit of liquid in there, but that's okay. You would get this from a bank or a creek or a stream. Remember that often the hobos, if they could, their jungles were always next to a water source. Just like us, they had to drink and cook and bathe and all of those things. So we're going to take this, we're going to put this in the bucket. The other item that you're going to need is a coffee can or a number 10 can. That'll work great. And this goes down inside the bucket. Now, it's very important that we fill up the bottom can, the larger can, with enough sand so that this top lip is above the other can. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what it looks like up close. You can see the sand on the bottom, and then looking at the lip, our can is just barely above the other larger can. And that's what we want. And now we're going to continue to fill this with sand and dirt all the way around the outside until we get it filled up around the outside circumference until it's level with the top of this outer larger can. Okay, and that's what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be pretty. Doesn't matter if you get some down in here. That's perfectly okay too. Again, remember, this is going to be for a fire, so we're not completely worried it's going to get filled with ashes at any rate. This is kind of what you want to have. Let's see what that looks like. Again, just a little bit above the rim of the other can. Now, what do we do for firewood? One of the things you would often have around railroads are discarded railroad ties. And the railroad doesn't want them. They're no good anymore for the track bed. They've gotten too rotten, and even though these take a really long time to deteriorate, eventually they go bad. Now, the old railroad cross ties were made from wood that had been treated with creosote. And of course, this is a flammable material. And so many of the things that a hobo could find for fire, he could pick up along the railroad. He could make his own charcoal if he wanted, or purchase it, or borrow it from someone perhaps. He could also use slivers of railroad ties, which was very common. You could also find chunks of coal that had fallen off of the coal tender back during the steam train days. As a matter of fact, on many of the rural railroads and places out in the country, one particular place I know I can still find coal just littering the roadbed. So again, it was very common. But hobos would have to carry things with them. One of them, of course, being a good sheath knife. Something that's strong with a good sturdy blade. And they would use this to whittle off some of those railroad ties. Now you want to make sure that the tie's not too rotted, but you also want to make sure it's not too sound. You're looking for slivers. And so a hobo would harvest and take off as much of that as they would need, maybe break them up into small pieces, stick it into a pocket where they could carry it. They would also perhaps have a small hatchet, something like this. And this would be something that would be lightweight, be very easy for them to take with them. Something like that. And with this, it would be a little bit easier to chop things off, as well as you had a hammer for doing projects and putting nails into things. But this would be very handy. Again, it's very small, relatively lightweight, solid metal handle, riveted on here with the scales, so it's not going to break. And this would be just a fantastic implement. You would want to carry something like this. Right here we have a railroad tie. It's starting to crack and split off, so that right there is a good piece to start with, and we can go ahead and just break that. This is going to make wonderful firewood. But then what we also need to do is we'll need to take and shave off some splinters. And you can see here that makes some pretty nice curls. And so you would just spend some time getting up under there and getting it some really nice, again, not pithy, but still solid, but the tie is starting to splinter off. The hatchet, of course, would be a great help in this, as it's a little bit easier to get splinters using a small hatchet. Good idea to wear gloves anytime you're working on something like this with creosote. Now, again, I wouldn't recommend everybody doing this today. Creosote is not healthy to breathe. This is for demonstration purposes only, to show you what they would have used and how they did it. I'll finish harvesting this and I'll get back with you. Now, if this has been out in the rain, as this has for a while, you want to make sure you get to the dry inner wood, and then just like you would do with anything else, you want to start making some curls so you have something to light. Now, this is going to be kind of hard, but you can do it if you work at it. But you want to make some decent little curls so that our match, which is what they carried most of the time, you want to make sure that you have that so it can light well. And you want to make several of those just to make sure that you've got enough to light. And if you do end up cutting it off, just grab it up off the ground before it gets wet, and it should still work just fine. When you get ready to start your fire, most hobos would have carried their matches in some sort of a match safe. This one right here comes from Logston & Company. I could put a link down in the description box below. Opens up like this. Nice place for the matches. A striking surface. You can just take that off and re-glue a new one on there if you need. But it has a nice cover. Of course, you don't want to do that too much. Generally, you should push it down, but just to let you hear what it sounds like. So this is how we're going to light our fire. Holding the match safe in one hand and getting the slivers out there where we can light them. Go ahead and strike that match. Now remember that this is going to be really smoky and oily from all that creosote, so you want to try to stay out of the smoke as much as possible. Alright, now we're just going to put it down in here like this, and then we're going to start adding some slivers to it while it's burning to get it going better. And when I mean slivers, I mean like matchstick size stuff. And you build it just like you would any other fire. Alright, I did have to add another match to it, but other than that, it's doing real good. And I would just want to very carefully place some more wood down in there. Now you do want to make sure that your pieces of wood aren't much bigger than the top of the can, because you don't want to have this huge fire. I may do that for like a video shot for the thumbnail, but generally speaking you do want to keep this small, and you want to keep this going until all of this sand gets really hot and begins to radiate heat, and then you keep a bed of coals going down inside. And that's what it looks like when it's going strong. And even though this has just been burning for a few minutes, it's already starting to get quite warm. So you can see where you kept this burning for an hour or two, this entire bucket would just be really hot. You'd have a nice bed of coals in there. You could take this into your shelter with you, or anything you want, or just sit around it and hold it if you wish, depending on what your shelter was. But that's really nice and warm. Not too hot, can still touch it, but it won't take too much more of that, and you wouldn't be able to put your hands on it very easily. And that's going to hold heat for a lot of hours. Well folks, that's one of the ways it was done and how the hobos kept warm in cold weather. So get out there, practice your hobo skills, and have a great time. This is James Bender for Waypoint Survival. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also make sure and check out the links in the description box below, just under the More button. While you're down there, you'll also find our waypointsurvival.com link, and this is where you can sign up to take survival and bushcraft classes at our beautiful training facility here in Southern Ohio. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. And when you do subscribe, make sure and press that bell button so that you can stay notified of all of our upcoming videos, and we'll talk to you next time.